Well, this was certainly something. Um, yeah, this is. Uh, I, I wanted to watch this because everybody I've ever talked to about this film, which I've never seen until now, has always sort of like alluded to the fact that ooh, maybe it's unsettling, maybe it's unnerving, maybe it's appropriate for spooky season. And I was like, ah, whatever. It forces me to finally watch this film. So I'm John Stark from BackTheMovieGuy.com and a review of I'm Thinking of Ending Things. With the lights on review because I'm not even going to play around with you. I I may hold on to this. I'm like recording this. I'm always a little bit ahead of content, so I may even just sit on this and put this in November. So it was recorded for spooky season. It is unnerving and unsettling, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's scary. It's just weird, you know? It's directed by Charlie Kaufman, and it's written and directed by Charlie Kaufman. And generally, whenever I've had the opportunity to talk about him with anybody, I'm always like, he's somebody who writes really good, and then you have to like filter his thoughts through another director. When you look at the best Charlie Kaufman stuff, it's always been filtered through someone else. Like it's not just him filtering his own stuff. Sometimes with a writer director, you get like a great script, and then the director takes that and then they go, okay, I see the madness here. Let me put this into perspective. Well, Charlie's perspective is still his own. So that's the difference between like this film, Synecdoche, New York, and Adaptation, which Charlie wrote. Is that adaptation is filtered. It's run through another director, so it has that difference of vision and opinion. This doesn't have that. This just has Charlie Kaufman being Charlie Kaufman. So I'm not a fan of Synecdoche, New York. I did see that as an adult. I'm old enough. Yeah, I think YouTube knows. It tells me nobody under the age of 35 watches my channel. I think the word is out. Um, yeah, I saw Synecdoche, and it was at a time when I'd already seen like Adaptation. I was loving Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. I mean, I was watching offbeat, quirky, odd films as it was, and then Synecdoche came out, and I was like, I don't know what this is, but I hate it. And I just I hated this less. It kind of makes me think like if I could go back, but then that's not fair because I'm having a different experience because now that I'm a blind film critic and I can't see, it's like, well, now I'm just analyzing a script. You know what I'm saying? Like Synecdoche was very visual also. For what it's worth, it was. It had a lot of visual aesthetic to it, and to try to make that comparison now, I feel like it could be getting a pass simply because I'm not also seeing as a sitting through it, or it could get worse. I may hate it even more. Who knows? But it wouldn't be the same experience. It wouldn't be an even, like, well, let's see what happens 20 years later. Because I'm not the same eligibility walking in the door. Uh, this is on Netflix. It has audio description, and it stars Jesse Plemons, Jesse Buckley, Toni Collette, and David Thewlis. So it's a pretty solid cast, and it's just weird. Um, I don't really want to go into it too much because there's not much here to go into. So I'm going to try to briefly describe what the film is about. I do want to just make one thing clear just because of the title. The film is not about suicide. So if you're like, I'm thinking of ending things, oh, I don't want to watch a film about suicide, it's not about that. Um, the title is said repeatedly about 100 times by the lead character, Jessie Buckley, who is, I don't think she's ever given a name. Um, I think she's always just referred to as young woman, even in the audio description track. I think the only person who's ever given a name is Jesse Plemons' character. I think everybody else is referred to by like who they are to the film. So basically Jessie Buckley plays a young woman who is heading off with her boyfriend to meet his parents, but she has to be back that night because she works a shift. Weather could be inclement later. She's a little nervous, and she keeps sort of, we hear a lot of her internalized thoughts about, you know, like, I really like this guy, but, you know, I don't know if it's going to work out. I'm thinking of many things. And then he'll ask, he'll be like, what are you thinking about? And she'll be like, oh, nothing, you know. And that's basically how this film goes for 2 hours and 15 minutes. They do eventually get to the house, and they do eventually meet his parents, played by David and Tony. And that, I guess, sort of changes up the dynamic a little bit. But only because there are more characters to play around with. The film always kind of stays in this weird beat. Like, this is what we have to offer. Enjoy. And it's not going to be for everybody, but I think cutting mainstream audiences out, I would say, yeah, it's going to be really tough for mainstream, you know, people who are like, I'm really looking forward to Fast 11, you know, probably not for you. If that's your most anticipated film coming up, this is not going to register for you. It's one of the reasons why this has like a 6 point something on IMDb when it really should skew higher. Its Metacritic is in the 70s. I'm guessing if I looked over on Letterboxd, its score would be decent on there because it feels like it skews that way. It skews directly towards people who are like film buffs. This is the kind of thing where it's like, even though it's not A24, that term A24 vibes that I've heard so much, it's got A24. This has A24 vibes all over it. This is like, this film makes me feel like A24 like got into a room and had a complex about how they were not the ones releasing this. Like somebody was viscerally angry at A24. They were like, I can't believe this film is not with our studio. There's never been a film that's been more A24 than this film. Like, it is the most A24 non-A24 film of all time. I'm going to make that declaration. I don't think there is a film that A24 has not released that has been screaming to be more on A24's catalog than this film. It's just like, how is this a Netflix film? It's bizarre. It's weird. Both its existence on Netflix and the fact it's not A24, and the film in general, everything is weird. Performances are interesting because the film is odd and interesting. I'm not going to say it's bad. I refuse to, because I think it's an interesting experiment. There were parts about this that I liked, and that's why I'm thinking, like, would I like Synecdoche nowadays? But there are also parts where I'm just like, what are we doing here? What is, like, not all of it always makes sense, you know? And I don't think he cares. I don't think Charlie Kaufman cares that his film doesn't make sense. I think he's just like, yeah, well, whatever. But what was that? Who cares? You know? I have a feeling interviewing him would be like the most fun thing, because he'd just be like, you'd be like, well, I didn't really, he'd be like, well, fuck you then. Yeah, I don't care whether or not you liked it. Okay. You know, I feel like a lot of this is just him, like, with a middle finger. He's like, somebody gave me money and I made a movie. That's art. Accept it, you know? And it leans so heavily into how we can all have different opinions on film, and film is not for everybody. Like, not every film is for everybody. I don't mean like film itself. Film should be as a medium for everybody, but not every film is for everybody. Although there are some films that we generally accept are for most people, but still, it's like you find that one person who doesn't like Toy Story, and you're like, "What? I found him." You know? It's like you're trying to call, you feel like you've won a prize. Like, "I found the one guy who doesn't like Toy Story." You know, "I found the one person who didn't get, uh, Shawshank Redemption," or whatever, like, these, like, widely accepted movies. You're just like, "I found them. They're over here." Um, but, yeah, those people exist. There are people out there who didn't like Jaws, didn't like Godfather, and we think they're weird, and we look at them and we're like, "I don't understand you, like, as a person." This, you can look at it and you can go, "Yeah, I totally understand which demographic would not like this." And the kind of demographic that uh, uh, signed up to Netflix because of Hubie Halloween or Hubie Halloween. How did you pronounce that dude's name in that movie? I don't know. That movie was terrible. But uh, I love that Netflix is willing to challenge themselves with something like this and release it. It's been sitting there for a while, and I've never watched it, honestly, because I just never really wanted to. I'm not like a massive Charlie Kaufman fan. I was like, I'll see it at some point. Well, some points today, I thought it would qualify for spooky season because every time I've talked to somebody about it, they've always been like, "Oh, that film was just, oh my God." Like they've all been traumatized by it. And I was like, "Oh, I can't wait." Nope. It doesn't really traumatize me. It's weird. It's unnerving. It certainly has moments where you're like, I would even argue it has a jump scare. I would even argue he throws in a jump scare unnecessarily, but um yeah, it's an odd little film, and I think you should watch it. The audio description is minimalistic. There's not really much. The film is minimalistic. So it's not a robust audio description track, but at the same time, you don't really feel like you're getting lost. There's a whole bunch of this film that's literally just Jesse. I just in that moment realized they had the same first name, as I was gonna not use their last names. The Jessies are in the car together, uh, and they're just having conversations, and the amount of screen time that takes up is quite profound, uh, because there aren't that many locations that they go to in this, and when they change locations, then they get in the car and they drive. You know what I'm saying? So not only do they spend, but they spend a lot of time in the car just driving. And it's in a snowstorm, so I'm pretty certain you can't see shit anyway. So there really isn't anything for anybody to describe. So there really isn't a lot of description here. There were actually moments where there was silence and there was no description. And I was like, I feel like there should be description here, but it's like, but then again, nothing has changed. Nobody's moved. What would you do? Like, what? Did they run out of things to describe? Like, you could just, I don't know, keep describing the detail of the young woman has sort of a reddish tinge in her cheeks and as I mean, like the color of lipstick she's chosen for this is, I don't know, like what point, like what what little things would you have to go into? And then if you feel like the audio description is almost eccentric in and of itself because it keeps trying to find things to describe, but it's basically it's done all of the things that it would have done, just nothing's changed. So, but then when things do change, it finds ways of coming back in and being like, okay, we're in a new situation. I gotta wake up the narrator now. Like, so, um, I don't think it's a bad track, but I can't also be like, wow, that was my favorite audio description track of all time. It just doesn't really set up the audio description team for success. It's a weird film. You're just gonna have to experience it for yourself. I don't really want to give too much away. That's the best way to say is if you like mainstream films and not indie films, if you hate things that A24 puts out and Neon puts out, if you were sitting there going, why is Parasite winning the Academy Award? What is this Everything Everywhere All at Once? This is not for you. It's just not. If you like all that other stuff, if you generally don't, if you're somebody who laments the amount of superhero films that we have at the box office and the amount of Fast and Furious sequels that we've had and all that kind of stuff and legacy sequels we keep bringing back, well, why haven't you seen this yet? So I lay somewhere in between where I like all of it. So, um, but not always Charlie Kaufman work. But yeah, so I don't grading this is really hard because I feel like he's on a different scale. I don't know what that scale is, but trying to put him on like an alphabetic scale. I feel like Charlie Kaufman wrote his own scale, but he hasn't let me know what that is on how to grade him. Um, it's probably something weird where he's like, "Oh, sheep. Yeah, I got it." He gave me a sheep. This critic gave me a pig. I'm like, okay, I don't know what the scale is for you, but I'm sure it works for you. His mind must be so interesting. Um, for me, thinking of ending things, I think I've seen things that are sort of like this, that resonate with me more, and I'm like, oh, that was really cool. I really like that. I really like what I was doing here. I found myself sitting in a car a lot, listening to windshield wipers. But I gotta say it's a swing. It's a big swing, and I tend to like that as a one-time watch that I never want to see again in my life. Uh, sure, yeah. So I'm thinking of ending things a B. I think it's absolutely appropriate, and yeah, I think a lot of people would like this one time. I don't know who watches this like 20 times, but go you. Anyway, that's it. Those are my thoughts. We'll see if I keep this in spooky season or not, or if I push this to November, but it's not really that spooky. Like I said, it does have a jump scare. It has like one jump scare in it, so it lightly qualifies. And it is unnerving at times, so. All right. That's it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys on the other side.